Hi, I'm John Feldt, and this is the weekly water outlook. This is the rainfall from last week across the nation, and as you can see, it was a pretty quiet week. We've had very little rain. Blues are only about a half inch of rain or less, and you can see there are widespread areas, Pacific Northwest and California, that receive little, if any, rainfall. The predominant story is not a lot of rain over the last week. Now, there were a couple spots that received more significant rain. They were pretty isolated. These are these areas in yellow and red, Mississippi, Alabama, parts of Kentucky and Tennessee, as well as Louisiana. Now, if we look at the departure from normal or the percent of normal rainfall for last week, large parts of the country received only 25% or a quarter of what would be normal over last week. So it's been pretty dry for the third week in a row. There were a couple spots that received above normal rainfall. That's the blue and purple, those areas that have received more rain last week. But I think for the most part, quiet, uneventful, and dry has been the story for yet another week over large parts of the nation. Now, the big picture, as we look at the jet stream, which is driving the weather, um, somewhat similar and a little bit different than the last few weeks. The jet stream this week, again, we're looking at high pressure bulging to the north and the west. And then over the east, lower pressure, but the jet's going to gradually be rising further north, pulling north. That's that blue line by late in the week. So under the ridge of high pressure in the west, dry weather, lack of rainfall, well below normal rainfall over the next week. In the east, along the jet, there'll be some rainfall. It'll be scattered. Some areas could receive some significant rain. I think more areas will receive lighter amounts of rain. South of that jet stream, over much of the middle part of the nation in the south, it's going to be pretty dry, pretty quiet. There'll be scattered precipitation. Some areas might get some heavier rainfall, but a lot of areas are not going to receive all that much at all. Now, there will be a stalled front along the Gulf Coast in Florida, and that region could receive more rain over the next week. So this is the rainfall potential across the nation. I think the story is going to be little or no rain over the next week over large parts of the region. I've shaded those in there, and there's not much rain at all over those areas. Over the upper Midwest, along that jet stream where there's a little bit of energy, there could be a couple inches of rain, and that's in blue. I think the area of most significant rain is going to be in red, and that'll be 2 to 4 inches of rain along the Gulf Coast and over parts of Florida, primarily northern Florida, along that stalled or slow-moving front. Elsewhere, there will be some rain. It's just going to be scattered and not all that significant other than on a local scale. Now, we're getting closer and closer to the peak of tropical season, and it's going to be important to show where will systems go should they develop. This doesn't mean that they're going to go there because that's up to the Hurricane Center predicting where systems will move, but these are the general steering flows, and there have been some changes in the last week. So far this season, pretty much we've had the eastern U.S. block. Systems have curved north and then northeast, or they've gone east to west and stayed in the far south Gulf of Mexico. Now that this high is pulling a little bit further east, I think there's a third option, and this is one that if it comes in near Cuba or maybe north of Cuba, this could get in the Gulf of Mexico and perhaps curve north around that high. Basically, we have a lot of options right now depending where systems do develop. And I think over the next week or so, that's going to be very important because as we get into the peak, we can get repeated tracks in the same area. So there is a system out there. It's not a named system or organized yet, but there is a high probability that it could be later this week. And if it is, we're going to have to talk a little bit more about what path it might take and produce potential for heavy rain. It's still too early, but with peak hurricane season almost here, we're going to have to keep a very close eye on that. So your takeaway points this week: for most of the nation, a very quiet week, large areas of little or no significant rainfall. Heavy rain will develop along the Gulf Coast and over Florida. A tropical landfall is not expected this week, but I think we need to keep alert because maybe later next weekend or the following week, next week, we might have something getting a little bit closer. So I'll be covering that and more throughout the week with information. So consider subscribing at bluewateroutlook.com if you'd like to get information throughout the week or more detail on the water situation across the nation. Thank you for listening to this week's edition of the Weekly Water Update, and I will be back again about a week. Thank you.